fairest, fair thee we, thou best and dearest, thine be ilka joy and treasure, peace, enjoyment, love and pleasure. A fond kiss, and then we sever. A farewell, alas, forever. Deep in heart run tears that pledge thee, warring sighs and groans I'll wage thee.
I'm so glad that we're joined today by Kirsten Bridier. She's the Executive Director of the National Trust for Scotland Foundation based up in Boston. And what better person to speak to than you, Kristen, at this Burns season moment? One of your leading properties, of course, are the Burns Cottage and the museum and the surrounding buildings. And you've just launched a campaign, yet another one, because you're always doing such wonderful work there. So let me turn it over to you. If you could then tell us a little bit more about what is going on there.
Thank you so much, Camilla, for having me. Burn season is just the best time of year. I'm always grateful to Robbie Burns for being born in the middle of January when we need a little pick-me-up and a little excuse to get together after the holidays. As you said, the National Trust for Scotland cares for the cottage where Robert Burns was born. We actually have 7 properties across Ayrshire that are associated with Burns and his works, and they give a real glimpse into his life and his inspiration and the world of 18th century Scotland. And over the past 10 years, Americans have contributed more than $400,000 toward the conservation of these Burns properties, including recently the acquisition of the Honors Field Library and then getting the material from our Burns collection, so original manuscripts from Old Lang Syne and Tam O'Shanter, digitized and put online so that you can research them from the comfort of your own home. But as you mentioned, this year we're doing some essential conservation repairs to 2 of the properties that are associated with Burns, the Bachelor's Club and Souter Jonnie's Cottage. And these are both A-listed buildings, which means they have international significance. They're just very simple, humble, vernacular Scottish architecture, but they're still thatched. And there are actually only about 300 thatched cottages left in Scotland. Most of these cottages have had their roofs replaced, slate or other materials put on. So it's really important that we're conserving these buildings. As you know, the west coast of Scotland is extremely wet, rainy, and windy. And with the impacts of climate change, precipitation is expected to increase by 11% each year. And that's just really hard on these historic buildings, especially with thatched roofs and with traditionally harled lime harling on the exterior. So what we're doing, oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think the magic of the whole an atmosphere of the Burns Cottage Museum and buildings is this moment of taking you back in authentic time.
Exactly.
And it's wonderful. And that's why the thatch roofs and all of that and the size of the rooms and everything is so important when you actually visit there, because we forget that, and especially Americans visiting for the first time.
Yeah, and I think sometimes when you think of the National Trust for Scotland, you think of huge castles or very fancy country houses. But actually, these everyday buildings are really important to telling the story of Scotland's history. And the cottage that Burns was born in, his family lived on one side of the cottage and the animals lived on the other side of the cottage under the same roof. And at Souter Jonnie's cottage, Souter Jonnie was a real person. His name was John Davidson. Burns knew him and incorporated him into his poem Tam O'Shanter. And he was a shoemaker, and he had a shoe shop and a shoe workshop where he made the shoes, a room where he tried the shoes on people. And that was also his family's living room, and they slept upstairs. The Bachelor's Club was an ale house downstairs. And then upstairs, there was a big meeting room that Robert Burns and his brother started the Bachelor's Club in and had dances and debates. But there's this real mix of work and life together, like the whole life of the community, the whole life of the village together in these buildings.
So also you have a lot of programming going on at this time over at the Burns Museum. What are some of the things that you have coming up?
Well, the Burns Museum will celebrate Burns Night with a Burns Night in the Burns Cottage, which is always extremely special. And then we are bringing the Gregg violin over to the US, back to New York in April. So the Gregg violin was an 18th century instrument that was owned by William Gregg, who was Robert Burns's dancing master. And it was played at the Bachelor's Club for dances. And Robert Burns probably played it. His brother probably played it too. It's a beautiful instrument with all of this intricate painted decoration all over it. It's a little bit smaller than a regular violin. And the cool thing about instruments is that in order to conserve historic instruments, you need to keep playing them. It's not like you can just put them in a museum or on a shelf and not touch them. The actual playing of the instrument is what protects it. So we're bringing it over to New York for Tartan Week. And on April 5th, it will be played by Duncan Chisholm at the Hooley in the City at Carnegie Hall. So we're really excited about that.
Well, we were fortunate enough a few years ago when you brought it over, about six years ago, with my corgi was reminding me, that we had the Gregg violin at our Burns night with you. And that was wonderful. So I can absolutely attest to how beautifully it plays. It really, people were mesmerized by it.
It really just does transport you back in time. And I wanted to mention one other project that we're working on while I have your attention. So we have just commissioned, the National Trust for Scotland and NTS USA have just commissioned this wonderful Scottish actor and writer named James Clements. He splits his time between New York and Scotland, and he is using our archive of Robert Burns manuscripts, letters, and materials to create a new piece of theater. It's going to premiere at the Fringe this summer, and then it will be performed at NTS sites in Scotland in the fall, and then here in the US in the spring of 2026. So we're really excited about this.
Something to discuss.
I know. So we'll have more information. I just had a meeting with James this morning. He spent the whole month in the Burns archives in Ayrshire in Alloway, and really getting inspired. He has lots of ideas. And so I'll keep you in the loop as that project moves forward, because the thing that's exciting is that Robert Burns still resonates with people today, and he resonates with people in America as well as with people in Scotland and the UK, and
around the world. How many Burns suppers and Burns statues are there, Kristen?
Exactly. It's incredible.
Staggering.
And so to be able to translate that for today's audiences with this young actor is just going to be very cool.
Well, I think that's so exciting. So thank you for taking us on a little trip to Burns's country home, and to understand a little bit more about the Burns Cottage Museum. And we have put up how for everybody can contact the National Trust for Scotland Foundation and hopefully support this project, which is so important. You've done so much work with the gardens, with the building, with everything. So fabulous. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you for your support, Camilla. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Fond kiss and then we sever. A farewell, alas, forever. Deep in heart-wrung tears, I'll pledge thee war and sighs and groans I'll wage thee. There was a hell, neither north or south, or so the story goes. And on each side a flower bloomed, a thistle and a rose. One faced the mountains old and set, the other faced the sea. They grew alone, but weren't content, knowing this is all they'd be. So anytime you think you know how the water flows, recall how the story goes of the thistle and the rose. The thistle